laboratory in a cell, would you believe, in Wormwood Scrubs prison. All of these individuals, the Hoover's people get access to, and they learn from that. And where does it culminate? It culminates really in November of 1942. In November of 1942, Hoover basically says, "I've had it with BSE. I think I'm getting a runaround. It's clear I'm not getting direct information because Rothschild has informed us what they're sending over. Robertson's informing what they're sending over. Liddell is informing Hoover's men and they're not receiving it." So he says, "I'm sending my own man." And in November of 1942, he sends Arthur Thurston. Arthur Thurston was from Shelbyville, Indiana. Tough as a button, this guy. I interviewed Art on his farm many, many years ago in Shelbyville. Wonderful guy. Parenthetically, I asked Art, we were having a couple of drinks at his farm, and I'm lucky I remembered anything after dinner. But the long and the short of it is, I said to Art, now Art was brand new. Art's only 28 years old, and he's Hoover's man in London. And I said to Art, I said, just conversation, I said, "Art," I said, "who are your liaisons?" And I tell this to the FBI people all the time. If they think they weren't penetrated, you better guess again, okay? I said, "who were your liaison people, primary liaison people with the British?" And a wry smile came over his face, and he said, "Ray, my primary liaison with MI5 was Anthony Blunt, who was later determined, for those of you not familiar, was later determined to be one of the Cambridge Five." And anybody want to take a guess who the primary liaison was with MI6? Kim Philby. So you can just automatically assume that everything that the FBI was providing to MI5 and MI6 was going directly to the Soviet Union, anything. And then I want to end up, I'll just close it out with talking about some of the material that I had. As I indicated, Mark Bradley had access to the family. That's absolutely fantastic. You've got access to his documents. Where I was really blessed was new material was coming out, and it doesn't get any better than this. And what I had access to, some of you may be familiar, I talked about Guy Liddell. Liddell wrote a diary. He started a daily diary, and I'm talking about a comprehensive diary that went on sometimes for pages. And he started this on the second or third, I'd have to go back and check. He started it on the 2nd or 3rd of September 1939, and he kept it religiously. Every single day. He would dictate it to his secretary, and the next morning he would come in and she would have all of his transcribed transcriptions right there. He continued this. I wouldn't swear to this, so don't hold me to it. He continued this, I think, up until 1950. So what you have is literally a description, really the only comprehensive internal description of life during the Second World War inside MI5. And all the great names enter the stage and exit the stage left, okay? Philby's there. Hollis is there, Petrie is there, Menzies is and the great cases are all there, you know. And this literally was lost in MI5 files for years. So what I did was I'm just watching my time here, I literally took the unedited files, the original one, the edited ones, I suspect you have them here, the edited diaries of Guy Liddell, done by Nigel West. But I took the unedited diaries and I broke them down by category. I broke them down by generally by dealings with the FBI, dealings with Donovan, and they tell a remarkable story. The other one was a secret memorandum that went on for hundreds and hundreds of pages. It's simply called the Running Memorandum. And it was a top secret document, although there were no classifications at that time. But you and I would call it a top secret document. And it was produced by the FBI. and it was, like I say, a running memorandum, and it was sort of an eyes-only kind of a document. The only ones who were permitted to look at it were Hoover, Tolson, Edward Tam. Edward Tam ran the day-to-day operations of the Bureau. D. Milton Ladd, who they named Mickey Ladd, he was the head of the National Defense Division, and the other one was a fellow by the name of Crawford Carson. They called him Kit Carson, and Kit Carson was the head of the Special Intelligence Service. That was the distribution list. That tells another remarkable story. And then the other file I had was the BSC FBI liaison file, which has never been revealed. And I got access to that, and it talks about the liaison and how they operated back and forth, and how they still had to rely on one another, but there was this enormous tension. And the last one was the Ostrich file. I won't go into any detail because I've run out of time, but Ostrich, you and I are familiar with Ultra. I'm sure most historians of the Second World War, those who are familiar with intelligence, are familiar with Ultra. And what was Ultra? Simply stated, Ultra was the code name for the remarkable code-breaking work done by the wizards of Bletchley Park in breaking the German Enigma code. The FBI is not informed about that until January of 1943, as is Donovan. Donovan's not informed about it either. Okay, so what does the Bureau call that? Well, we don't know the origins. I suspect the origin of Ostrich was simply Art Thurston. That's what he came in. I can't figure out, you think of an ostrich, and, maybe if you really love ostriches, it's a beautiful bird. I think it's kind of an ugly looking bird. And you think about the bird with the head in the sand. I have no idea what the origins of the code name was, but they called it Ostrich, and it provides the history of the FBI's access to what you and I call Ultra material, and it tells a breathtaking story about the complexities and the problems that both countries had. As I don't know who it was, maybe it was Churchill, says two people separated by a common language, and boy, you see it in spades with this particular material. So that is my story, and that is sort of bits and pieces of this really remarkable story, and it's a story that had to be told. I'll just conclude it with the problem I had when I gave the proposal to my publisher. My publisher said, "No problem, we're going to get this right through." Well, famous last words. It went to peer review, and then you'll have individuals say, "Well, no, you can do it in one volume. You can do the German side and the Soviet side." Well, I always like to say that Joe Batvinis didn't raise any fool, okay? And I started looking at this stuff, and I'm saying, no, I'm going to dig in my heels. This has to be 2 books. It has to be a book about the FBI war against the Germans. It includes failures, where we step on our toes, where we're success. This is not a smooth running process, okay? This is not one of these. It's got warts and all. But I point out that it had to be 2 books. One is the hot war against the Germans, and the other is the what? The Cold War against our allies. And the story about FBI operations and history, World War II history against our allies, the Soviets, has yet to be told. So that's the story. I kind of drop it off right there. I'd be happy to answer any questions that anybody has. I know I've gone through a lot very quickly, so if you have any questions about anything, please get your hands in the air. I'd be happy to answer them. Anybody? Yes, sir.
Good afternoon. Thank you for coming to the State Department. And
thank you for the invitation.
I haven't had the privilege yet of reading your book. I look forward to doing that. But just having some knowledge on this subject matter, I wanted to get your take. The general sort of impression is at Hoover, always concerned about public relations as he was,
right,
when he wrote after the war about the success of the FBI, was that we basically rolled up all the German networks in the famous story of the 4 Abwehr agents who were deposited by subs off Long Island or wherever it was. And it was just at the end of the war, a case of pretty much complete success. So my question to you is that true? Do we really know the full espionage picture from the German side, what they were able to plant, how successful or not they actually were? Is that the full story, what we generally have, say, from the Hoover book in the 50s or 60s? And then the second question was, does your work go into any of the, what I think was fairly extensive work of the Ministry of Propaganda of the Germans and their efforts to send agents of influence who may not have technically been espionage agents and not at all connected to Abwehr circles and so forth, but highly influential, and was part of the international work of the Ministry of Propaganda that Goebbels boasted about for years and years, that he had sent legions of journalists and academics and so forth to tell the Nazi story. And how that plays out in the United States, to my knowledge, has never been really fully examined in a way that would give us some light on what the actual influence of the German government was during the war and right before the war. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Two excellent questions, and I'm going to put the second one. To rest right off the bat. I don't get into that, but we can talk about it offline if you wish. I do have some thoughts with regard to the second part. However, Hoover was absolutely correct. In other words, the back of the German espionage apparatus was broken months before the attack on Pearl Harbor. With those arrests of the 33 German espionage agents at the end of June of 1933, there were virtually no stay-behind agents, espionage agents here. We know that essentially because for a couple of different reasons. We know it because of the quality of the agents that they dispatched, okay? And you can read this on your book. The quality of the agents that they dispatched were really very poor. They were essentially not positively motivated, they were negatively motivated. They were trying to get out of a Europe that they saw collapsing. They saw the horror, and they wanted to get out and get to the West. They fell into two categories: people who sort of disappeared into the mist once they got to the Western Hemisphere, and those who decided to volunteer to the FBI or to the Americans, okay? We also know that there were two other factors. Communications. It's not like today I can leave here, go to Dulles, hop on a plane, and I'll have dinner tonight in Paris. The Atlantic was hermetically sealed off by the Royal Navy and by the American Navy. There was literally a cordon sanitaire from Canada all the way to South America. You had navicerts. The British had a navisearch system. They had a system of knowing what individuals were going on neutral ships. It was very hard to get to the United States. So they had that blocked off. They also had censorship through Bermuda. They had Bermuda censorship where the British were reading the mail. We had censorship. And then there was one other point, and I completely lost it. Yes, we know now. I was very, very lucky. I was in London in April, and I attended a conference at the Royal Military Academy at Sandhurst. In fact, I led a panel there, not on this, but on something else. And there were a number of scholars, American scholars and European scholars, because intelligence is becoming more and more accepted at these various history conferences, straightforward history, not intelligence, but straightforward history conferences. And a number of scholars have gotten into German files, Abwehr files in German. And the point I'm making is that the Germans were terrified of the FBI. Now, we know that they're not larger than life. I'm not larger than life. But in their minds, that arrest of those 33 agents sent a shockwave. It literally sent a shockwave through their central nervous system. And they were terrified. And the reality was the Germans, after that arrest was made, for the next 5.5 years could not mount a legitimate espionage capability and never did mount one. Does that help answer your question, sir? Great. Anybody else? Yes, sir.
Paul Engelstad, you may remember my uncle Judd.
Judd, yes, of course. I interviewed your uncle.
Great, because he never told us anything.
Yeah. Now his uncle, and I'm hard pressed. Was it in Uruguay or Colombia?
You know, I don't know.
Yes.
But
Judd Engelstad, Judd Engelstad, I interviewed him, and then he later moved down to Stuart, Florida, and he and his lovely wife were neighbors of my mother in Stuart. It's a small world, really.
Anyway, I've been looking at the development of ECA, the Bureau of Education and Cultural Affairs, cultural programs starting in 1940. And a lot of the credit has been given to Nelson Rockefeller.
Right.
And one of the things that I came away with was looking at the early part of 1940 is how all the knives were drawn inside of Washington, D.C., turf wars, because Rockefeller, his operation for Latin America was started out inside the State Department.
Right.
And the State Department wouldn't give him adequate briefings. So he formed an alliance with Hoover.
Yeah.
And so anyway, it was really a tangled web of who was providing the intelligence, and the acrimony between Rockefeller and his people down in Latin America.
You're absolutely right.
And the close connection with Hoover. And anyway, it's fascinating to realize how everything actually did work, but there was Donovan against Rockefeller,